Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this second work session to order on AO 2020-85, Repealing and Reenacting Anchorage Municipal Code Title 23 to adopt codes and local amendments. Let's start with a roll call, please.
Ms. Allard? Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Presberdia? Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Zolotel?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. As usual, if assembly members want to get in the queue, please put yourself in the chat or text me if you can't access the chat. All right, so for today's work session, we're going to start with a presentation from the administration. Then we'll open it up to see if members have any additional thoughts before we vote on Tuesday, as well as members of the industry, the builders, if they have any additional thoughts before Tuesday. So go ahead and turn it over to the administration.
Good afternoon. This is Bob Dole, building official for the municipality of Anchorage. Joining me in this presentation will be Brian Dean, the municipal fire manager, and Pierce Schwalb as an energy coordinator. And I'm going to just share my screen with you and start from the beginning. Just a second, sorry here. And would like to confirm that you're able to see the first slide of the presentation.
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I will provide a overview and then we'll proceed to Brian Dean. I understand that there's discussion amongst the assembly of exempting single family and duplexes from the requirements of IFC 507.1 by an amendment to 2020-85. We believe there's a preemption issue there and that before that could become operative, there will be, we require state approval. To avoid building activity being held up, we will go forward if the assembly opts for that amendment by issuing at-risk building permits until the matter is resolved and conditional certificates of occupancy. Once the matter is resolved at the state level, would determine whether those can become permanent certificates of occupancy or if the contractor is going to need to do more work. Just a reminder on 507.1, it is not the sprinkler amendment. International Fire Code section 507.1 deals with the requirement to provide a means for fighting a fire in the house or nearby it. And this amendment provides another option in how to address that. At this time, I'm going to turn the speaking part over to Brian Dean to continue for the next slide.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Brian Dean, Anchorage Fire Marshal. We've heard a lot of information about the effectiveness of sprinkler systems, and I just wanted to reiterate the sprinkler systems actually do work. They have been proven to both save property and lives. Real quickly, I just wanted to point out about how, according to the National Fire Protection Agency, that most of the time, 90% of the time, a single sprinkler activation is sufficient to control the fire. 97%, they contain it to the room of origin. And then really want to point out the reduction in property damage by the use of fire sprinklers. They don't end up flooding an entire house, usually just the portion where the fire is, that the fire is already starting to damage anyway. And so that's where we're looking at the return on investment there, is that reduction in property damage should there be an incident. Next slide, please. We also heard some information about how they perform in earthquakes. And, our most recent earthquake a couple of years ago, there's been some information put out about the fire department indicating that we had 200 sprinkler systems that were damaged during that quake. I also want to point out it was a pretty significant quake, and we had some pretty significant structural damage. Usually when your walls and ceiling plates separate in a commercial structure, you're going to have some residual damage to the other ancillary features of the building too. That said, we have over 4,000 sprinkler systems in Anchorage, and yet experienced only damage with 200 of them. That was not a bad average for the way sprinkler systems performed in Anchorage. We didn't receive any reports of residential sprinkler systems being damaged. And I also just want to point out that earthquakes happen a lot in Alaska, as we see from the data from the Division of Geological and Physical Surveys, Geophysical Surveys. Alaska has over 1,000 earthquakes a month, and 45 reaching a magnitude of 5 or 6 each year. And with the sprinkler systems that have been in place in Alaska for decades, they actually perform very well given our known seismic activity and are designed to handle that seismic activity. Also want to point out that most of the damage that we're seeing from our past earthquake were commercial systems that were rigid pipe, older systems. Residential systems are done with CPVC or PEX piping. They're much more flexible and able to withstand movement, and they're no more prone to failure than modern residential plumbing. So it's they're tested, they're tried, and they are functional. I want to just point out that they're not really the boogeyman out there. They do work, and they are an effective means for controlling fire. If we want to recognize the cost of these is not something we are willing to undertake, then we just need to own that. But we don't need to poo-poo sprinkler systems because they actually do work, and they're quite effective. And that is all that I have.
Alrighty, this is Pierce Schwab. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator. Wanted to speak briefly about the electric vehicle rough-in proposal. I think the biggest benefit is the cost savings of these provisions. The cost to install a rough-in during new construction is anywhere from $100 to a few $100s, compared to roughly in the thousands for the homeowner to retrofit later. If the homeowner decides to use the circuit for EV charging or a shop welder or something similar, they can do it themselves, or an electrical contractor can do it in under an hour. It's also much safer. There are plenty of instances where homeowners are charging their EVs using extension cords, sometimes multiple, sometimes underweight, running from their dryer plug in their laundry room to their garage or outside. And then finally, EVs are coming. We need to prepare for them. The US is going to need 9.6 million new electric vehicle charging ports by 2030. 80% of those are going to be residential. We anticipate roughly 25,000 EVs in Alaska by 2030, and this could even be conservative based on Ford's recent commitment of $11 billion in EV investment and $20 billion from GM. And then finally, cities like Atlanta, Flagstaff, Tucson, Denver, and Seattle, among many others, have already adopted similar provisions. Thank you.
This is
Just want to note for the record really quick that we've been joined by Ms. Allard. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Bob Dole speaking again. That slide I just flipped away from, that $2 billion that GM spent on one factory, that is yesterday's news, literally yesterday's news. The GM spent a comparable amount to the Alaska entire state budget for its latest. So they're coming. On the slide you see before you is language we would recommend be added by amendment to clarify that for the EV charging station rough-in, that we're not requiring the entire circuit. This language gets there and assures the cost savings intended for this point going forward. We had discussion at the last meeting about third-party review, and I'm concerned there's some confusion about it. Third-party review and how we audit that is necessary for that program to succeed. Right now, it is not succeeding. At the request of HBA members, we talked with after the last meeting, we've initiated the process that we have currently to deal with quality issues. That takes the effect of proceeding down the course of revoking third-party review privileges, citing incompetence or fraud. When we go down that, and if that's the only quality assurance method we have, it has a stifling effect on the industry in terms of those finding them, those doing third-party reviews concerned about reputation, and also because I have licensed professionals, the mandatory reporting they have to do to the state, there's state licensing agencies. We believe the audit function is a better way to achieve a function of quality control through general deterrence if we're going to maintain a viable third-party review system, which frankly, I believe is important that we do maintain going forward. In doing so, it is not going to be everyone provides everything on every permit, but rather at a interval every 20th or every 12th or 16th or whatever. If you're that person on an exempt one, you would be asked to provide the basis for the third-party approval. We believe it provides the best means to address some adverse trends we see out there without having adverse impacts on the industry. There's also discussion of the energy code and different ways we can go about addressing this amendment and creating an energy code. An amendment was proffered at the last work session that would basically stated that we would just adopt the AHFC standard. Realize AHFC is not a regulatory agency, and compliance with the AHFC energy provisions are voluntary. So in effect, we would be saying we would continue the status quo of having no standard if we went to quote the AHFC standard. Also, homes that are affordable housing that is seeking AHFC financing eligibility is already being built and tested to AHFC standards, because without it, you don't qualify for HFC financing. So this isn't really about affordable housing. This is with the $500,000 plus homes where this is coming into being and creating a minimal standard. Although we could just require the AHFC approach for all housing in the municipality, we don't believe that is necessary either. The MOA provision that we would allow for the use of a simplified prescriptive code to demonstrate compliance rather than doing the testing that AHFC requires, using an AHFC certified energy rater to demonstrate compliance. Again, we think it's a middle ground that gets us on the way of a sustainable energy code without the additional cost that the AHFC process entails. And that concludes the municipal presentation. I believe myself and the others are standing by for your questions.
Great, thanks so much. Are there any questions from the members? All right, I'm not seeing any. Mr. Weddleton.
Okay, thanks. I've got a few things, and Dean just emailed a package of amendments that, for the most part, are what we saw previously, and there's an additional one, but I wonder, and I just forwarded it to Bob, and I think Dean may have sent it to him. Do you have access to that, Bob?
I'm pulling it up as we speak.
Okay, the first one is something we'd seen, and then the second is the energy one that you'd addressed already. Then the third is deals with the water supply 5071, and that one, I guess, kind of has the issues that you said it might conflict with the state. There's a second version of that one, of Amendment 3, and what it does in that case is it puts it back to the way the exemption was stated a few years ago, and it goes to that section 507.2 about type of water supply. And the wording in this matches what is in maybe not the current one we're under, but the previous version of the building code. And I wonder if that would work and not have that issue with the state.
So
Before you answer, Mr. Dole, hold on. I just want to set some parameters here. So first, want to note for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Perez Verdia. And second, on amendments, I'm happy to have a general discussion on amendments, but I would ask members if they have any debate on amendments to save that for Tuesday. Please continue.
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. Realizing I've seen these now after you added that clarification for probably about 50 seconds, and the fire marshal is just opening these right now. We're obviously not in a position to deal with them substantively. I believe this would still require state approval, would be my read on it. I cannot tell where that was addressed for the prior language prior to the adoption of the 2012 IFC. So I believe we're still taking a different lower standard than the state, and we would require state approval. However, given I'm up to about a minute and a half of seeing this now, we really require further review.
And Bob, this is John. Yeah, I understand that, and sorry for the late minute. I just I didn't want to drop it on you on Tuesday. No, and look forward to some feedback on it.
Yeah, and
can I go?
Yeah, Mr. Weddleton, go ahead.
On the building audit reviews, another alternative. So, one of these amendments, Amendment 4, just scratches out the section that says building official may audit reviews. Would it work then? I mean, there's a concern in the industry that opens up auditing every single independent review. And it's clear that's not your intent, but this would be kind of on the books for quite a number of years. So if it were changed so it said the building official may audit up to 5% of the independent reviews, would something like that work?
Through the chair, looking and realize Assembly Member Weddleton, I think we work together effectively with Onsite with developing a viable program for making sure that a local manufacturer could continue to provide tanks in town. I think for something that we could responsibly pitch to the building code enforcement grading system evaluation by ISO, I would ask for 8%.
8%?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Up to
But
8%.
I think
But I would like to have, I think, again, this is just looking at industry standards elsewhere in manufacturing anyway. I think 5% could be problematic. I think 8% is a decent pitch.
Okay, good, thank you. And then we have, there is a prepared version. Amendment 5B has the wording on the EV charging that you had recommended. So that'll likely come forward. Then there's an Amendment 6, which you have probably had less time with, but this addresses the sheetrocking the ceiling of a basement or a crawl space.
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. I believe the fire marshal will address this since it's primarily firemen who are put in harm's way. At the second work session, we showed you the place where a firefighter perished falling through an unprotected floor. I believe, and again, we've all seen this, but it presents the same risk factors to members of the first responder community as well as occupants of the house. That is why we identified this as an issue when we started this process.
Can I speak briefly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And I just want to clarify for, hopefully the assembly members have access to the email and can read this. And this is what came out of the code review committee, but was not forwarded to ultimately to us in the code. So, and their discussions presumably, knew this balance and protection, for first responders, firefight, and the doing this. So it looks to me like it sought a middle ground in there. But if certainly Dean could be valuable.
This is Brian Dean, through the chair, Assemblymember Weddleton. You cut out a little bit there, but I think I understand your question is if this compromise position is acceptable as an amendment. Our experience and what we've seen from fire origin and fire development, it doesn't always originate in a utility room or a storage room, but it can originate anywhere, and any place that you have a fire originating under a floor that's not protected is going to fail much more rapidly, and just cause an untenable situation for firefighters entering in to try to extinguish that. I don't think just delineating certain areas of an underfloor assembly to be protected and others open is going to fix anything.
Right. Thank
And
you.
I believe Mr. Dole has a comment on this as well. Go ahead.
Through the chair, building official Bob Dole. This morning, I took a call that exemplifies the challenge in this area. Actually, yesterday and followed up this morning from a builder requesting to get out of protecting the putting in that protection over a unfinished basement because the owner didn't want it. But in further discussion, the owner already had plans for spray painting it black and how they were going to use that area. Given so many times, and this one was just straight up honest with us, these spaces become occupied anyway. This proposed middle ground would not address the safety issues there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or discussion from the members? And then after we're done with that, I'll turn it over to the builders. So anything else from members? All right, not seeing anything, then we'll go ahead and turn it over to the builders. Who would like to speak?
This is Drew Kaysen. I am online and available for questions. I didn't really have any remarks prepared for you guys today.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Spinelli would like to speak.
Hi, yeah, this is Andre Spinelli. I'd like to just comment on a couple of things, or I guess this is a question for Bob Dole. The first thing is he talked about an issue conflicting with state code, and if we chose to propose an amendment to 507, that then they would need to be issuing at-risk permits. And my question is how is that any different than what's happening today?
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. At this point on the books on 507.1, we have language. We have not abandoned it for residential construction. The language on the books, we've spoke previously about some enforcement issues, but we do not have a known variance between our code on the books and state code.
This is Andre Spinelli again. I mean, I'm pulling these permits, and that section is not being applied to residential permits for 1 and 2 family dwellings. And so I guess I just still don't see why going back to the same amendment that was in the 2009 code is any different moving forward than it was back then or in the last few years since then. And I guess I'll just move on to, I got a question on Mr. Dole's comments on the third-party plan reviewed permits or the exempt plan review permit. And there's currently a dispute section in the municipal handout AG 38. It's the last thing in there, and I think that if that dispute section was followed, there might not be a need for a new process. And then the last comment I had was just on the AHFC code, just to give you a little bit of kind of background on why the builders mentioned wanting to follow the AHFC code. Is in the past, the AHFC energy code has been changed, and the process for AHFC to amend their code is much faster than the process for the municipality. And so occasionally they've done it. It's nothing new. I mean, we're still amending Title 21 here and there when, you know, unintended consequences pop up. So I get from the builder's point of view is if AHFC identifies an issue with the code and goes through their process, which can be done in like 30 to 45 days to change it, then it might lead to having the municipality's code and AHFC's code conflict. And that was our concern there and why you heard from us. And that's all I have.
Thank you. So next we'll go to Mr. Taylor, and then I have a couple of assembly members in the queue with questions for builders. So go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Through the chair, Mr. Dole, I've got a quick question. You said that the third-party review system was viable and you want to keep it. Can you be more specific about the problems you're having? Because I just can't imagine in my mind that whatever problems that are occurring are going to compromise the safety of a house. I can't wrap my head around that.
Mr. Chair, this is Bob Dole. May I answer?
Yeah.
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. And looking at the issues there, one of the fundamentals of plan review, be it third party or by the muni, it is a different set of eyes than the person actually doing the design work. That is, many times we can't spot an error in our own work. That's the whole basis of plan review. And that's probably the greatest issue where I see it not, where I see transgressions happening right now. When an issue comes up, particularly after a initial plan review, and an inspector goes out and they find the third-party review designer or structural engineer out on site developing and doing the work to develop the solution. That is, no longer are they reviewing someone else's work, they're doing the work themselves and then representing it as reviewed. But it's the same person doing both. It violates the basic premise of plan review. Beyond that, we have a significant issue with and there's been building over the years of inadequate detail to determine what the plan or intent is, resulting in multiple visits on behalf of our staff and our inspector staff until the plan reviewer and the design professional determined what they wanted to do. Incidentally, our department got excoriated when back in the Bend and Adams report, when it was department plan reviewers who were missing necessary detail to get through the inspection. It leads to an ambiguity and difficulty in determining in the field, and where work has already been done and can't be undone, it does lead to a compromise. Last but not least, we actually have received plan sets on the borders of design professionals who are not currently practicing, but the design professional who is, but the third-party reviewer who has become part of that team is just trying to carry the work on behalf of the individual who isn't there. Those are the greatest ones. Beyond that, we had a foundation work proceed on a foundation without inspections for some earthquake repairs. Once we went back, the design professional and the third-party reviewer have been unable to demonstrate how it meets appropriate structural requirements for safety in an earthquake for over a year now. So it isn't just a matter of dotting I's and crossing T's, with all respect, Mr. Taylor. These are the ones that are out there, and we see increasing trends in this area. In any event, too, beyond just, safety, I mean, it's just the occupants. They've already paid for the place. There's also our score with the building code enforcement grading system, which also, in terms of the effect and cost on all buyers from year groups impacted by those houses, should be taken into account.
Isn't it inherent in the third-party review system that it's built in that you have two sets of eyes? You've got the designer most times doing the structural and wind calculations, and then the qualified third party doing the review. So there are two sets of eyes built into the system as I see it. So I'm not super clear on that. When you do have issues in the field, and sometimes the municipal inspectors point this out, and there's not a lack of clarity on the plans. Like Andre said, if you follow AG 38 guidelines, then you've got a procedure in place whereby that system or that issue is resolved. So I mean, I get it, but I don't get it, because we were very careful when we put the third-party plan review system into place to avoid some of these problems that you're bringing up. So is it really a problem? Is there a compromise of safety, or is it just kind of technicalities that are not being resolved between the city and some of the third-party reviewers and designers?
Through the chair, we maintain the issues that are coming to light are safety issues. When things are missing, like insulation for foundation footers where necessary, and things in the compromise that places there, it is far more than just clerical things. And the dispute process doesn't address the overall quality issues. That's for the ones that are caught because they're the most egregious, the most serious, the most visible. It doesn't address the overall assuring that the quality is there. So, and also, it looks great on paper, but when third-party reviewers, when we see them out there and they say, yeah, I'm finding the solution to this, it's not working. They're not waiting for the design professional to fix it. They're fixing it themselves. And we see enough folks doing that right now that we know of, that it creates a serious question mark about the quality of the program.
Through the chair, but I think most of those issues originate with the city inspectors, and that was the backstop originally to prevent this kind of issue from occurring. But when it does, the structural inspector is there refereeing the installation, and if the issue arises, he's there to blow his whistle and say, hey, you guys need to figure this out. And usually the designer and the reviewing professional come together and fix the problem.
Before you continue, so Mr. Dull, I'll go ahead and allow you to respond if you would like, and then I'm going to move on in the queue. I appreciate your input, Mr. Taylor. So do you have a response, Mr. Dull?
Through the chair, I believe I've already answered this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one question, and I don't know if Mr. Taylor's still on or if Mr. Spinelli, but it's just a general question of the building community, and that is, do you have a percentage or a number by which you could compare the custom made homes versus just a spec home? I'm just trying to get at the idea of how many people are basically making decisions specific to their home that they're having built versus one that the builders themselves are just deciding to build. So anybody can answer that, just the percentage of homes that are custom versus spec. And then I have another question, Mr. Chair, but for the administration.
Andre, do you want to take that?
Sure. This is Andre Spinelli. Spinell Homes traditionally was in the business of building a lot of spec homes. I would say more of a spec builder than many other builders. But over the last few years, spec homes have really become the minority of what we build. And if I just had to throw a number out there, I would say almost 80% of homes we build nowadays are pre-sold. And what that means is we actually write a contract before the home's even started or the permits are even applied for. So the homes are kind of designed with first the modifications to the floor plans are made, and then the buyers choose all their options and upgrades. So I think that should answer your question.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Taylor, did you have a different answer to that, or is that typical of your business as well?
Ms. Kennedy, yeah, that's pretty typical of the market at the moment. In the past, it was had a higher percentage of specs as starts. I've heard a national statistic that if you're a builder, that 50% of your starts should be specs. That's not the case in Alaska. For my company, individually, we will do 1 or 2 or 3 specs at most and at any given time. That's different for Andre because his volume's significantly more. But specs are definitely part of the market. They're just a smaller percentage now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Thank you, Mr. Spinelli. And I do have one more question, Mr. Chair, and I can wait if you want to put me back in the queue, or I'll ask it. It's one for the administration.
Go ahead, Ms. Kennedy.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is just in regard to kind of the credibility of inspectors. It seems like we're having a little bit of a contest between who has better inspectors or better eyes or what have you. And I know there's been, I guess, a recent issue. I have no idea who this employee is, but apparently there was one in the building department that had basically built his own house, didn't do the inspections, didn't have the proper permitting, yet should know the rules and should be able to understand how all of that works. So I think that's a bit of a credibility issue. So I kind of want to get at this idea of why are MOA inspectors the ultimate authority on inspections? So, I mean, are government inspectors somehow better qualified to make these determinations than a professional in the private sector? So how do we know that one inspector is actually better than another and will catch these problems or have the same kind of capability as somebody else that might be in the private industry? Thanks.
Through the chair, this is building official Bob Dole. I'm not as to employee matters, those are within the province of our Human Relations Department, not ours. I will say for all cases where we're aware of violations of the building code, we treat the property the same way within the Development Services Department on what actions we take against the property and the permit. Moving on to your question, the plan review discussion we've been having has been third party versus government versus municipal employees. We do not have third party inspectors within the municipality of Anchorage. The difference you see overwhelmingly is in the quality is the quality of the inspectors. We have inspectors in each of the trades inspecting work in that area. They are demonstrating a journeyman or master level of expertise in that area. They've been foremen or superintendents before we've hired them as inspectors. And then they are getting ICC certified in that particular trade. Many times what you see with private sector inspectors is they're a jack of all trades, master of none. They do not provide the same quality. Where we earn one of the parts where we earn such high scores for the building code enforcement grading system to give your commercial landowning constituents those insurance discounts is that level of expertise to actually understand the full extent of what they're looking at.
Okay, so you're actually saying that the MOA inspectors are better qualified than anybody else in the private sector?
Through the chair, respectfully, no. You can achieve the same level if you're going to have a specialty inspector for each of the trades, decade of experience in it and demonstrating the highest levels of competence and the ICC certification. You can achieve that same level in the private sector. However, a generic one-size-fits-all inspector isn't that person.
Okay, thank you. That's the clarity that I needed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Gates?
Thank you. I was going to ask about the problems that Mr. Dole was describing about the independent third-party plan reviewing. One of them was that sometimes the design professional and plan reviewer are the same person or the same company. And I wondered, though, this is supposed to be caught when the permit application is submitted, right? So are some of these getting through somehow? I guess I was reading the code, the part about independent plan review on pages 27, 28 of the ordinance describe it. I think it's not changed from prior code. Let me know if it has, but assuming it's the same, that this problem was supposed to be an application for permits denied if they don't have a different person identified as the plan reviewer from the design. Also, are these getting through the cracks somehow? And I guess I have a follow-up question.
Through the chair, this is building official Bob Dole. They are not getting through the cracks. It is not being accurately depicted who is actually doing which work. Frequently, the design work is attributed to being done to somebody different than the third-party reviewer, and in fact, it's the third-party reviewer doing both. So, according to the documentation, they're two distinct individuals, that there should not be a compromise of the third-party review. That is not what we've seen in practice.
Okay, this sort of leads to my follow-up question, if I may.
Go ahead.
So you clearly have caught some of these people doing that, or it's and in fact the same person, although they identify different people on the documents. Isn't this sort of the basis for some action against their municipal license for doing this kind of work? And has there been enforcement actions against any municipal licenses, or I guess referral of the violation to the state licensing bodies? What kind of enforcement's been done by these issues you found?
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole again. We are initiating those actions as we speak and looking at the ones that have come out of this building season, starting with the action where I see that action is I meet with them to have them show cause why their license should not be revoked for fraud or incompetence. They can appeal to the building board. Meanwhile, to the extent my licensed staff in those professions concurs with those qualities being met, they will be reported to the state licensing boards.
Anything else, Mr. Gates?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Allard.
Thank you. I guess this question would be probably going to Bob. Bob, the gentlemen and women that are the inspectors within the municipality, are those individuals all belong to the union and gone through the union for their inspector licenses?
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole. They are currently union members. They are required to be union members to be in those positions. There's no such thing as an inspector license. There's an ICC certification that they typically get on their own after they come here. Of the folks that have come into these positions, the last 4 I can think of did not come through the union to achieve that journeyman level of expertise and be licensed through the state of Alaska at that level. They did it in non-union businesses. It is true they have to be union members working in these positions, but you do not have to go through the union to acquire that expertise.
Thank you, Chair. Can I do a follow-up?
Go ahead.
So it is very possible that the individuals that are inspectors that do not work for the municipality can and do have the same experience as those who are a part of the municipality. Would it be fair if we possibly could put together something where they could show where their level of expertise is the same as those that are part of the municipality? As you know, we don't want to discriminate against people who don't work for the government versus those who do, right?
Through the chair, that already exists in terms of the ICC certification and the position description describing the skills they have to demonstrate to hold the position. So it's already there.
So thank you. One more follow-up, Chair, and then I'll be done. Bob, you're not a builder and you're not an inspector, right? But you don't think you're any less as well experienced as somebody else with your job within the municipality, do you?
Through the chair, this is Bob Dole again. My experience arises from overseeing the efforts at the corporate level as we did $140 million relocation of the 176th Wing from Coulis Air National Guard Base onto J-Bear and working to make sure that stayed on track. Also assisting in redesigning the engineering and building support functions as we consolidated J-Bear between 2 different bases. And the last 4 years at DMVA, I think we passed each other as I was going out and you were coming in part overseeing directly the state employees involved in facility maintenance and renovations and construction.
So you have a lengthy resume, so it's very possible that other inspectors have the lengthy resume that way with their experience too. Okay, I think maybe we can kind of formulate a plan where even if they are not part of the municipality, they still have a lengthy resume that could definitely give them that experience to continue on as inspectors. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dole. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Open it up one more time, otherwise I will end this work session early, and then we'll just have Tuesday to continue our deliberation. So any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, then I want to thank the builders for attending and the Mr. Dole and Mr. Dean for your presentation, and looking forward to Tuesday. Thanks, everyone.